And we'll go ahead and get started. So, hello, Elon parents and families. Thank you so much for coming to our Phoenix Families Live webinar. My name is Robin Lane Jimenez, and I'm the Assistant Director of Parent Engagement here at Elon University. Today, we are joined by two wonderful staff members from Residence Life at Elon to discuss the housing selection timeline, available housing options, and important deadlines for the 2026-27 year. So I have the pleasure of introducing Kirsten Carrier, Assistant Dean of Campus Life and Director of Residence Life, and Molly Mancuso, our Housing Coordinator for Residence Life. So without further ado, I will turn things on over to Kirsten.
Excellent. Thank you for the intro, Robin. And it's great to have so many folks here today interested in learning about housing selection. Again, my name is Kirsten. I use she, her pronouns. I've been here at Elon for 4 years now, so 4 housing selection processes helping our students get great new bed spaces for the following academic year. And so we are going to run through some slides today that gives you a big overview of the process, talks about our individual processes. And so if your student is a rising sophomore, that's going to be towards the later part of the presentation because we are going to talk sequentially through our process from beginning to end. We have a great website I will try to refer to it multiple times throughout the presentation that I certainly would keep pointing you at. It's going to have all the dates and more information and screenshots about the processes. And so hopefully your students have taken a look at that so far, have started thinking about roommate groups and things like that. So certainly take a look at the website afterwards as well. And we also have this recording for our students because we already did this info session for students a few weeks back. So it's already recorded and posted on our Get Your Questions Answered page on the housing selection website for our students as well. So point them there if they're having follow-up questions. We also have some future Q&A sessions for students. So if you talk with your student after this session and they have more questions that are specific, we just have Q&A Zooms that they can log into and ask individual questions. We're also going to be at College Coffee doing tabling and things like that over the coming weeks. We love walk-ins here in our office, so we are very available and happy to talk folks through their individual process since it can be a little complicated in the first time. All right, so I do like to start off with just what's new in housing selection because some of you may be families who have been through this process before and you just want the highlights. What are we changing this year? What's new? Because things do change every year. We generally try to keep the same flow, the same priorities, things like that, but there's always something that's different each year as we look to accommodate our students' needs and interests. And so I will emphasize that we have more campus housing available for our juniors and seniors this year than last year. It's been great to see us, building some new buildings, increasing bed space availability. And so although we only require students to live on campus for the first 2 years there at Elon, so that's 4 semesters, their first and second year typically, we do have a lot of our juniors and seniors that do stay on campus with us, over 1,000 that will stay with us each year. And so certainly encourage you to continue to live on campus if they're a current sophomore and thinking about maybe going off campus. We should have plenty of availability, especially in apartment style facilities for juniors and seniors this coming year. We also offered an incentive to keep those folks on campus that has passed at this point, but in case your student is a junior or a senior next year and they signed up for that, we did offer a 1 free month rent incentive to help folks choose to stay on campus for next year. We do have a new housing software system. It's called Phoenix Living. It's run by a company named StarRez. And so our students are going to be using Phoenix Living to do all of their selections this year. Just a little bit new interface, again, very similar process, but it comes with some nice new functionalities that we'll talk about. We are also offering graduate student housing for the first time. This is limited graduate housing. It's one building at our Crest Apartments. It's right next to the Francis Center where a lot of our health sciences are. So maybe your student is in an accelerated pathways program. Maybe they're thinking about nursing or thinking about our physical therapy program. Good to know that we do have graduate housing this coming fall for the first time on campus, and we hope to continue offering that in the future. We do have in the Oaks Apartments, it's one of our most popular apartments, especially for our rising sophomores because they really want to get into an apartment. We only have a few that are available. We did decide to undouble a bunch of Oaks Apartments. So there used to be Oaks Apartments that were 2 bedrooms with 2 people in each, so double rooms that shared an apartment in Oaks. This year we're undoubling those to make more 2-bedroom, 2-person apartments, and so we don't have any more doubled apartments in Oaks in this selection process this year. And like I said, StarRes gives us some new functionalities. I'll show you about the roommate search options that we now have. But students do have an option to kind of shop for roommates and proactively make roommate groups with people they maybe don't know, but want to, match based on certain characteristics. So we're happy to offer that this year on the platform. So what is housing selection? Who can participate? It's for currently enrolled undergraduate students. They have to form those groups with current students. Students who have been on a leave of absence, so they are kind of a currently enrolled student, they're just not enrolled for that particular semester. They are welcome to participate. But students who are graduating next year, are withdrawing from the university, maybe somebody who's not currently admitted, so they're coming in for next fall, those folks are not participating in this process. And I always get asked about study abroad, study away. If our students are going to be away from campus for a semester, if it's that fall semester, we typically tell them don't participate in housing selection. Housing selection is really to secure a bed space for the coming fall semester. And so students who are away for fall do not participate. When they are ready to come back, usually in October, we'll premiere a housing application for winter and spring. They'll complete that application, and then either we place them in a bed space that becomes available for spring semester, or they do an apartment lease turnover. And so they maybe know someone who's leaving an apartment because they're going to be studying away for the spring semester. They would say, I'm going to be taking over that lease, and that person would give the lease to that person. And so that kind of secures an apartment space for them upon return in spring semester. Now, we do sometimes have students buy out an apartment, which just means they're going to secure it during housing selection. They're going to continue paying for it in the summer and fall, even though they're away from campus. And so again, that's typically the exception, not the rule. But if your student is interested in making sure they have the specific apartment with their friends for winter and spring when they return, they can select a space for the summer and fall and leave it empty, move their stuff in, but turn the key into us and be gone for the semester. They just continue to pay that same rate for holding that space for them empty. So that's what housing selection processes are. It is a really simple 3-step process. So your student applies, they group, and then they select. So right now they are applying and grouping. So they complete that housing application on Phoenix Living by February 10th. That is the due date for the housing application for everyone. We do have a little earlier due dates if your student's seeking housing accommodations through our academic accommodations and accessibility office. We have a little earlier due date if they're seeking to return or apply to a living learning community, to one of our LLCs. That's February 1st. Generally, the housing application is due February 10th if they're not participating in those couple processes. After they submit that housing application, at the end of the application, there will be a page that lets them start roommate grouping. Now, roommate grouping is live throughout the entire process. They don't have to just choose a roommate group and be done. They can revisit that page up until selection day. So that might mean that we're going to group of 2, but now they really want to, try for a Park Place apartment. Well, that's groups of 3, and so they're going to find one more person to add to their group right before selection day. And so that's why those groups are dynamic throughout the process, all the way up until they select that space. I get asked a lot of questions about how to find roommates. How do I make sure I can get that group of 8 to get a Danieli flat together? I only have 6. How do I find 2 more people? I'll talk about our roommate matching tools that we have available. Now, again, you can't group with someone if they haven't done the housing application. So everyone who is actually searchable in roommate fields must have done that housing application for us. And then the last step in the process is to select. We give randomized housing selection times to everyone who's applied for a process. In your roommate group, whoever has the best random time is going to be the one that's logging into Phoenix Living that day. They're going to shop around for available spaces, select something, and plop everybody in their roommate group into their particular bed spaces, getting everyone into the right room, the ABC room, ABCD room, whatever it might be. And we do have different days and times for different types of housing, so I'll go over that in a moment. I'd like to take a moment to remind parents, families, students about renters insurance. As the university, although we provide, great amenities on campus, we do not insure against any damages to students' personal belongings. So laptops or other clothing or things that your student might bring to campus, we do highly encourage students and families to invest in renters insurance. It's affordable. It helps cover in the event of damage to those items, loss of those items. This is a company we have partnered with called GradGuard. Your student will get information about it every year when they do the housing application as a reminder. Definitely an affordable option. It's got a nice $100 deductible, so it makes it kind of accessible if it's a bike that's stolen, if it's a laptop that's taken from the library, or for. And it even applies for students that are off campus at the time. So if they're sitting away and something would happen. So I had a student that misplaced a whole cart of items during move-in this year, and they had renter's insurance and were able to claim that misplaced cart of personal items. So great examples of why renter's insurance might be important to consider. So chat with your students about that option. We do encourage students to know your classification. We have two pretty distinct processes, one for rising juniors and seniors who aren't required to live on campus. They do go first, and then one for rising sophomores. If your student is a transfer student or is coming in at kind of a non-traditional timeline, we do put them into one of those two buckets based on prior terms lived on. So how many terms had they lived on here at Elon or at another university? And so they should know what their classification is. They're always welcome to reach out to us if they feel like it is not the correct classification. And again, we do have that 2-year residency requirement. So all of our rising sophomores should plan to live on campus next year. We grant very, very few residency exemptions. And so most of our sophomores do live on campus for those for the second year. So where do students live? I know, especially parents, families, you may be, used to where your student is living in their first year, maybe in their second year, but you're like, what are the options for next year? So we have a lot of options. We'll go with that. We have 8 different neighborhoods, and this gives you a bit of idea of how we typically assign these spaces for returning students. So rising sophomores are typically going to be selecting spaces in Colonnades, Danieli, Global, Loy, Crest, and Oaks. Those are the ones that they are eligible for and would be part of their process. Now, rising juniors, rising seniors have other options because we have 2 apartment communities that are juniors and seniors only. And so that's Station at Mill Point and Park Place are only available to juniors and seniors. But we do have rising juniors and seniors that will live in Crest and Oaks and other apartments as well on campus. So it gives you an idea of kind of what neighborhood pages to start looking at if you want to look at the room layouts and the amenities and which LLCs are where. These are where our students will be eligible to live. Here it is in a graphic format because I always get asked, where is my student probably going to end up? They really want an apartment in their sophomore year. You can see by the numbers that most of our students in their sophomore year don't live in apartments. It's pretty hard to get into an apartment in your sophomore year. Most of our students will be living in those Danieli flats together, which are great because it's kind of a transitional option. You've got 4 double rooms, so 8 people sharing 2 bathrooms. You've got, your own little living room, your own kitchenette, a little dining area. So you get more kind of personal community space than just a double room by yourself in a long hallway. And so a little more independence with that sophomore community. And so our sophomores really do enjoy Danieli flats before they, transition maybe more to full apartment living in a junior, senior year. We also have a lot of sophomores that live in Loy in our fraternity and sorority community, so I'll talk more about that in a bit. And then definitely in our colonnades and global communities as well. Typically, it may be in living learning communities, but it wouldn't have to be. As far as our juniors and seniors, yes, most of them do live off campus because, again, they don't have a residency requirement. They're looking for a little more independence. But we do have plenty of them that stay on campus, and this is where they're typically living. So Station, Oaks, and Park Place are typically the most popular. But we do have some students that really like staying in a studio, like in a standalone single in Colonnades or Global for their whole time. They really enjoy that independence and being close to campus. And so those are options within our process as well for juniors and seniors. I'd like to pause for a moment on the difference between residence halls and apartments. We do have 2 very distinct types of housing on campus, and they come with different obligations. And here's a good graphic that, side by side kind of compares them. If you are a parent of a first-year student right now, they are all in residence halls. And those residence hall communities open and close during our break periods. That there's, not an obligation for a lease, an apartment lease. They don't have to pay for that space if they're canceling, things like that. And it's usually a double or a single with shared bathrooms. But apartments, on the other hand, we're talking a 10 or a 12-month lease. And so that means that they are typically staying in that space or paying for that space in summer as well. They sign that lease agreement, that's binding. And so if you select a space for fall, we expect that you're living there. And if you don't, it's your responsibility to do a lease turnover to find someone else to take that lease from you. And so you definitely want to talk to your student, even if they're excited about the amenities of an apartment for their sophomore year, it may not be right because they'll be paying for summer housing and you're not interested in paying for summer if they're not going to be here. Or, it is a different price point. It is a more expensive price point. So certainly take a look at that. So there are differences between those two as far as their obligations, as far as our cancellation policies, the lease year, things like that. Roommate group minimums. So all of our neighborhoods have different style rooms, different size suites. So there's a lot of different numbers to keep in mind. We do want folks to be fully filling a room or a suite or an apartment during all of our processes. And so our processes are set up for full group sizes. So that means that there is a pod and colonnades, that's 4 single rooms. People that are in a group of 4 are going to see it first. If there's a pod of 2, people in a group of 2 will see that space first. And so you can see here that this is where the different roommate groups are applicable. And so if you have a group of 8, the only place you're going to be able to select is a Danieli flat. That's the only place where we have space for 8 people to live together in the same suite. But if you have a group of 4, there's a lot of different options. So it could be part of a Danieli flat, it could be an Oaks 4-person single space, it could be a Danieli O&P apartment. So there's a lot of different spaces that kind of fit groups of 4, and the same thing with groups of 2 and groups of 1. So this is kind of helpful if your student is trying to figure out how many people do I need to fill a certain space. It's about room type, it's about neighborhood, and it's about kind of what process they're participating in. So you can see more information about this here, making sure you have the correct number of people, because our process is set up that if you log in on a certain day to select, let's say, Oaks Apartments are going to be groups of 4 or 2. If you log in on that day to select something and you are a group of 3, you're not going to see anything. Or if you're a group of 1, you're not going to see anything. So it's going to be important that their group size fits the group process that's happening that day, and we'll talk them through it too. So I'm going to go through a few specific processes right now. And again, I'll breeze through these a little bit, but lots of information on our website. But we do have a housing accommodation process. If it's a student's first time getting that housing accommodation, they want to get registered with our academic accommodations and accessibility office first. They're completing a full housing accommodation packet of paperwork. However, if they're continuing the same accommodation from last year, they only have to complete the housing application. On the application, we tell them, this is the current accommodation we have on file for you. We plan on you using this, and they need to reach out to us if they don't plan to use it. Now, if there's a change that they need to their accommodation, let's say they had one accommodation last year, they see that on the housing application, but they're like, ooh, I need something a little different next year, they do have to complete a housing packet with academic accommodations and accessibility, indicating it's a change to my accommodation, and wait for that housing accommodations committee to review their request and tell them what's granted. And so that whole timeline is online. We also have an emotional support animal approval process, very similar as far as the paperwork and the process goes. So certainly look at that as well if there's an ESA interest. This is a complicated chart, but it definitely talks you through from the moment of, I think I need a housing accommodation, to, is it the same one as last year? Is it different? What do I do? Do I have to fill out paperwork? Do I not? And then what happens? So that helps a little bit for our students who are going through the process. And we have proactively reached out to every student who has housing accommodations currently to give them personalized guidance and information to let them know, here's how you might navigate the process coming up. So they should have that in their inbox. Here's living learning communities. We certainly encourage students to think about a living learning community in their returning student years as well. It does not have to be the same LLC that they're in currently. They can go to a new LLC, have a new experience. Just like in the first year, students do have to be in the same LLC if they're going to be a roommate pair. So roommates should be applying to the same LLCs. And you can see that our returning students are only eligible for LLCs that are in global and colonnades, because the LLCs in historic and east are only for first year students. And so these are the ones that they'd be eligible for. There is one, the Eco Village LLC at Loy Farm, that is only for upper class students, so no first year students live there. Great little tiny houses out at our Loy Farm, a great kind of more independent living experience, always highly reviewed, so certainly consider that. We also have an info session tonight for our students on living learning communities. So if they're looking to learn more, definitely have them log on. Here's the process timeline. Again, a little earlier deadline, February 1st. Our LLC students are then notified if they're accepted to return to the LLC by the LLC advisor by February 12th. And then they have their own selection day. So even if you're applying for an LLC, you do get to still select your space. The advisors tell us what order students in that LLC should select in, and then they'll log in that day, see what's available, and put themselves or put them and their roommate into a space in the LLC. For our rising junior and senior process, again, students are randomly assigned a selection time if they've applied on time. The person with the earliest time is the one that logs into the system at that time to see what's available. Everyone has to have completed that housing application to be eligible. And again, we don't guarantee housing for these folks. We anticipate having plenty of housing this year. This gives you a little idea of how this process rolls out. The juniors and seniors go first in February. Our rising sophomores go in March. Students who are currently at station at Mill Point are given the opportunity to renew their same space. And then if they didn't renew their same space, we offer that to new residents a couple of days later. Same thing, if they're in Park Place, they have an opportunity to renew that space, or we will fill it with new students a couple days later. And then we do renewals in Daniely, Crest, and Oaks. And then we open it up to the rest of the rising juniors and seniors to fill the rest of those apartments or fill some individual residence hall spaces like those singles in colonnades or global will be part of that process. We may reach a cap at some point. There is a limit to how many we can allow for juniors and seniors, but again, we think we have plenty of space this year for folks who are interested. And again, they get those housing selection times just a couple days before the processes start, and we keep them in the same order for every process. And so we kind of randomize everyone one time, and that's their priority order, but their times might shift a little bit through the processes, but their order is the same. So definitely they should be communicating with their roommate group to see who's the one who's got the best time. If your student is looking to renew an apartment, somebody who's currently living in the space that wants to renew that space, they need to talk to their current apartment mates, figure out who also wants to renew, wants to come back for the next year. And then they need to fully fill that apartment. And so if there's an apartment of 4 this spring semester and 2 are graduating, and these 2 want to renew the space, they do have to fully fill the apartment with 2 other eligible students on that renewal day to be able to renew the space. They can't renew a partial space. So if it's a 4-person apartment, you gotta have 4 people in your renewal group. The person who currently lives there is the one that logs in and does that renewal. And then after that process is done, we typically don't have juniors and seniors participate down in the sophomore process, but sophomores can get pulled up into the junior and senior process if they have folks they want to live with who are juniors and seniors, especially someone who currently lives in an apartment and is just trying to fill out a roommate group so they can renew that apartment. Sophomores can certainly be pulled up into roommate groups with juniors and seniors, but they're not eligible to live in station at Mill Point or at Park Place, and so they can't join those roommate groups, but roommate groups that are going for Oaks or Daniely or Crest by all means can get pulled up. There are some resources we offer to students who are moving off campus for the first time. We have a partnership with College Pads, which is an off-campus housing search website. So local landlords and apartment management companies post here to our off-campus housing website to provide a listing for students. And we also have Today at Elon. It's kind of a want ads, classifieds type section where anyone can post looking for a roommate, looking for a lease turnover, looking for off-campus roommates, things like that. And so we'll see students reach out. It's nice that it's behind an Elon login. So, these are all Elon people. It's not just a Facebook group where people are randomly joining, but it's, that it's Elon people that are logging in here to look. And this is where we direct students to go if they're looking for off-campus roommate matching. All right, so we do have fraternities and sorority housing on campus in our Loy neighborhood. Our individual chapters are the ones that are really responsible for selecting and filling those spaces each year. Here you can see kind of the flow on how that goes. And so in February, prior to our rising sophomore selection processes, students would get notified if they were going to be accepted to the house. The presidents are the ones that submit those rosters to us each year. We also hire house managers out of each house, kind of like an RA type position that works on our staff for the year. And so we'll be having that hiring process as well during the fraternity and sorority process, but you can have an idea of how that goes. And so if a student wants to know, should I make a roommate plan with roommates to live in a Daniely 8-person, or am I going to get into the sorority house for next year? This is the date when they would know. So by the latest, Wednesday, February 11th, they would know, am I getting pulled into the sorority house or not? And then they can make a plan to live in a Daniely flat or live somewhere else with friends. And so this gives you an idea of when they would know that. All right, our rising sophomore process, hopefully things are looking familiar by now, but They get a random selection time. The person in the group with the best time is the one that selects on behalf of the group. They have to do that housing application in order to participate. We do require them to live on campus, so we do guarantee them housing. If they fail to do the housing application after the process, we'll go back through an audit and randomly assign them housing if they failed to select something during housing selection. And it's a little bit simpler process because our current first year students, our rising sophomores, don't live in any apartments currently, so they can't renew their same space. And so they're all moving into one of these three processes. So the first thing we do is the Daniely 8-person groups. It takes a lot of work to get 8 people together. We prioritize those folks to go first. I've never run out of Daniely flats on the 8-person day, so as long as you got an 8-person group together, you're typically guaranteed an 8-person flat together. After we fill out those 8-person flats, we'll move on to apartments. And again, apartments typically do run out for our sophomore day. And so if your student's got a selection time that's the best in their group, that's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd be surprised if they would even see any apartments available at that time. I think we've typically run out around noonish on apartment selection day. And then we go into our last process. On March 18th, this is all remaining spaces and in colonnades, in global, and then Daniely flats as well. So these are residence hall spaces, no apartments on that last day. But if we have Daniely flats that didn't fill up, that's often spaces that students find available. And we do prioritize roommate groups still on this last day. And so, groups of 4, groups of 2 will see those types of spaces that they fully fill. And then the last hour of the day from 4 to 5 p.m., we remove all filters as far as how many people you have to have in your group. So a student that's just an individual student that just wants a double room, doesn't really care who the roommate is, just wants to put themselves into a bed space, they're going to be able to participate that last hour of the day just to put themselves in any available bed space. So those are the 3 processes for our rising sophomores. Again, they're going to get that housing selection time in early March, so they know what order they're in within their roommate group and they should communicate with each other. And we do offer a couple roommate socials. These are in-person roommate socials for undergraduate students. And so the first one is coming up in early February. And so if they're interested in maybe joining a junior senior group, they would definitely want to go to that one. We encourage roommate groups that are looking for just one more person or a couple people to join their group, and individual students who are just looking to join any group to come out to the roommate social. We have pretty good luck every year. Students really enjoy it. We do some funny matching questions and they get to know each other. And then we have a rising sophomore specific roommate social that's after junior senior selection, but before rising sophomore selection. That's at the end of February here. This is a preview of kind of what the roommate matching section looks like on our housing application, so you get an idea as well to help your students. You'll see on the left-hand side all these green check marks. This is the housing application. And so this student has been through all the parts of the housing application so far. Their housing application is basically complete, and all they're doing is roommate matching now. And so on this page, it gives them 3 different ways they can roommate match. You can see there's 3 different ways they can search for the roommate by details. So search for the roommate by their last name, by their email address. They can search for a roommate by roommate profile. Like, I really want to find someone who is really cleanly and, and stays up late. And they can search just for people that are matching on those characteristics. They can also use kind of our algorithm to suggest roommates, and it'll actually give a percentage match. It'll say, here's 10 people that are the highest percentage match with your roommate matching questions. So it'll take a look at your matching questions, other people's matching questions, and say, these are the people that'll look like the best match. Students can message each other here on this platform, see if they're going to be a good roommate match, a roommate group match, and then add each other right here as roommate groups. You can see this person has not selected any roommates, but right here on this page is where they would start to see their group form. The person who sends the roommate request is the group leader and is the one that's kind of responsible for making sure everyone gets added to the roommate group, and then that person has to log in and accept the roommate group request. So this is the roommate matching page. You can see it's not a separate part of the process. It is in the housing application that they can continue to revisit all the way through the process. Now I'm wrapping up with my more formal comments, and hopefully we can get to some live questions from you all. This is the scary overview of all the dates in one spot. That's sometimes helpful just to see the whole flow of everything together from application due dates to LLCs to housing accommodations, our junior senior process, our Loy fraternity and sorority process, and then a rising sophomore process that goes last. You can see how that all kind of flows together from February to March. So we'll be all wrapped up right before spring break, basically. There is one process you'll see here way at the end that we do open after spring break, and that is our sophomore residency exemption process. That is on purpose. We aren't able to approve very many sophomore residencies exemptions, and so we do want all rising sophomores to participate in the housing selection process. We want them to go through the process, roommate group, find a space. If they still want to apply for a residency exemption at the end of the process, that is an application. We will review those and use criteria to decide what are the few that we're doing, but we're talking less than a handful of exemption applications that get approved each year. So it is certainly at the end for a reason, and we encourage your student to explore living on campus as the primary. If you have more questions, we certainly want to hear from you. Lots of different ways to contact us. Definitely encourage your students to get engaged and be the ones that contact us as much as possible. We want them taking the lead on making these great decisions. I know it can be a little bit of a stressful process as well. So talking them through it, game planning, having a first, second, third option, always a great idea. I know that having family support in kind of, oh, I didn't get my first choice is helpful, so you can understand why was that important to them and kind of help them make a choice for what's next. So Robin, that's what I have. I hope we have some great questions awaiting us.
We do. Thank you so much for all of that wonderful information. So we'll kick off our Q&A portion of this webinar. If you have some unanswered questions so far, feel free to add them in the Q&A part of the Zoom, and we hope to get to all of them. So first, we'll start with my student is currently a freshman in an LLC and is hoping to return next year. She's filled out the LLC section of the housing app with her first and second choice, but she does not have a roommate in mind necessarily, though she wants a roommate. So for the LLCs, do you have to have a minimum of two to have access to those rooms?
This is a great question. So LLC processes are pretty much the only process where you don't have to fill the room like you do in all the other processes, because we know students in LLCs oftentimes don't necessarily have a roommate group. They just really want to be in that LLC. And so as a single student, I can go in and select a single bed space in a double room. But if I am in a roommate group of 2 people or 4 people, I can, as a person that's logging in the earliest time of my group, I can select a space from multiple people and select my roommates who are also in the LLC to put them into a space. So that is one of the only processes where we kind of have both options available for students who do want a group or who don't want a group and want to see what's just available and put themselves in it.
Fantastic.
Great.
That definitely answers that question. Great question to answer live. When does the roommate match portal open? My son says it's grayed out in the portal, but he's completed the app already.
Well, certainly reach out to us if there's any issues. It is currently live. All of our returning students are roommate matching. And in fact, our incoming students for next fall are matching as well, currently on the portal. So Phoenix Living should be live. It should be accessible. If they're having any issues, they can reach out to us, chat, email, or phone anytime so we can see what's going on with their particular application.
Great. All right. Next question is, I have a rising sophomore who wants to be in Danieli and has a group of 8, but we're curious if this is a 10-month or a 12-month lease. They're not planning to stay there over the summer.
Great. Yeah, so Danieli is kind of a mixed community. So it's a great question because Danieli is the only neighborhood that has both residence halls and apartments. And so it's confusing, and we certainly know that. And so in Danieli, the apartments are 4-person groups. Danieli O and P are single rooms, and Danieli A through F are double rooms. So two double rooms like that. It sounds like your student has a group of 8, and so that would be a Danieli flat. Those are 8-person groups, 4 rooms, 4 double rooms, and those are a residence hall. So those do open and close. It's just the academic year. There is no summer lease, no apartment lease obligation, and Danieli flats for 8-person groups.
Great clarification. All right, next question is, if my sophomore is shooting for an apartment and cannot get one during selection, do they have to change their roommate group in the application in order to select a standard double or single in a dorm when it's time to do so?
Potentially. And so if your student was going for, an Oaks four-person apartment on that apartment day and they didn't get it, and they're looking at what's available for the next day, they might stay in a four-person group because they really want to get one of those four-person pods and colonnades, or they're willing to do maybe two double rooms connected by a bathroom, and that's a suite in colonnades or global. So they could stay in a four-person group, but it is dynamic. And so when they log in, if they're not seeing any four-person options and they want to try to see what two-person options there might be, they could go in and remove two people from the group. Anytime groups change, the person who gets removed gets an email saying, "Hey, you've been removed from the group," so they are aware what's going on and can then group as two-person groups and then search for groups. Sometimes folks will go into two-person groups and find two doubles that are on the same hallway at least, or in the same building or something like that. So it's dynamic on purpose, and it's live through the process. They can literally look for rooms and then say, "Oh, there's nothing there. Go to roommate matching. Unmatch with these people. You all do your roommate matching. I'm going back in and looking for two-person groups now." And so it's throughout the whole process.
Fantastic. And that is also another reason to have some backups for your students' housing plans. So make sure that you have a few different thoughts in mind. All right, next question. If a student plans to be roommates with someone who asks for an accommodation, do they need to do their application by the accommodation deadline or the regular deadline?
Ooh, I love this question. Yes, by the accommodation deadline would be appreciated. Technically, that could be the regular deadline because, we're not going to be able to hold you accountable for the February 1st deadline. But it helps us to know that we have this many people and the person that the person with the accommodation is requesting we call it a pull-in. So a student they're pulling into their accommodation. It's good to know that student has done everything and they are eligible to be a pull-in. Otherwise, they're probably getting an email going, "You were listed on someone's housing accommodation as a pull-in. However, you have failed to do something." And so they're probably going to get that email if they don't do it by February 1st. So highly encourage it. That would be great. Our students with housing accommodations can only pull in one student to their housing accommodation. Only one. If our rising juniors and seniors typically select their own spaces because we typically have a lot of availability for them, and so they are usually not getting placed by us. It's our rising sophomores that will kind of get pre-placed before the process by coming in to meet with us in person and us placing them and their eligible roommate at that time.
Fantastic. Good to keep in mind. Our next question is, my daughter is a rising junior and applying for the Oaks. What is the lease period for the Oaks? She will not be at Elon during the summer.
So the Oaks is a 12-month lease, and so those leases start June 15th for new residents and go through May 31st. If we have a student that's returning to the same space, then it is a June 1st lease through May 31st. So it's back-to-back years. They don't have to move out. We don't go clean the space. They're just there for an additional year. So typically June 15th for new residents. We don't let students, sublease or have somebody else take over their lease just for summer. Summer is always connected to the fall term. And so if your student is studying away for fall, but needs housing just for spring, they can't take just for summer, they can't take just a summer lease from someone. It does have to be summer and fall together as the same person who's doing leasing. So yes, that is a 12-month commitment, and maybe that's not something that you're looking for in the sophomore year. We do find it, a lot of juniors and seniors are looking for a little bit more because they don't want to have to move out every break and go home. They've got internships. They want to be here more year round. They want to be on campus during that winter break, not have to. So it comes with more flexibility if you don't have to open and close the halls or move your items if you want to live in the same place junior and senior year. Being in the same apartment and just renewing it is often very convenient for folks, especially who are, living out of town and don't want to have to take all that stuff home every summer.
Yes, definitely. We also have some storage scholars too, just to keep in mind for those in that situation of moving out. All right. This student is hoping to live in fraternity housing. Should they fill out the housing application?
Definitely. Our fraternity and sorority housing is part of our housing here at Elon. And so anyone who wants to be eligible to be placed in a fraternity or sorority house has to have a housing application on file by the deadline. So please complete that housing application. You don't necessarily have to do roommate matching or anything if you think you're going into a fraternity or sorority house, because again, the house president is going to be the one that gives us that roster and tells us exactly who's roommate matched with who based on their processes. So, but yes, we need a housing application on file.
And then follow-up question to that, if they don't get into Loy, can they modify their roommate list?
Yeah, again, that roommate list is dynamic, right? So through the whole process. So you might have put, I want this roommate group, but then, oh, you got into Loy. And so, you're going to actually go in and remove yourself from that roommate group so that group can find someone new. And so I know that those dates are really important for our students who are in those processes to figure out it's not just getting accepted to a fraternity or sorority, but it's also getting actually placed in the house, which are two different things because our houses are, only a certain size, and so not everyone in their rising sophomore year lives in the house here on campus. And so certainly have a couple plans, talk with friends about it, and hopefully you'll get some good clarity there around mid-February when those house rosters are turned in.
Definitely. A really great question to answer live just came in. What is a pod? Can we outline that one more time?
Sure. So we have a couple pod styles, but essentially a pod is a couple single rooms that are sharing the same living space. So in global, it could be two single rooms that have a little living room and their own bathroom. In colonnades, we have some pods that are four single rooms or two single rooms. So if four single rooms have two bathrooms and have a little living room area. And so oftentimes we use the word pod to describe single rooms that are attached somehow. So you get your own space, but you also kind of have a friend that's in your same space together, as opposed to a double room that is just two people in a space and they're sharing a bathroom down a hallway. We also have suite style double rooms. So you're looking at two double rooms that share a bathroom in the room. And so we call those suite style doubles. So again, name any type of room, triple, double, whatever. We have it all. We have a lot of different styles in different neighborhoods. And so definitely getting to know, take a look at those neighborhood websites. They all have great little floor plans you can see. I think we have the 3D roomie models on there too. So you can kind of spin the room around and look at the 3D model from different directions. So hopefully that's helpful in really understanding like what are we getting with these different options.
Fantastic. And that's a great segue into one of these other questions. Will you have an open house tour for sophomores to see the available spaces in person?
Great question. We did host an open house this fall already, and so we like to get students thinking about the process early. And so we hosted that in October, especially as we were trying to make sure our juniors and seniors knew what options were here on campus. It is the only open house we host officially. We definitely encourage students to use all the photos on the website. We have floor plans on the website, so we find that our students can usually get the information they need to make those good decisions either by going to the fall open house or by seeing what we have on the websites.
Fantastic. There's lots of interactive materials on the websites too. It's great to use that 3D modeling because you can really get a sense of the whole rooming space.
Mhm.
All right. What happens if you have four people lined up, but one person withdraws from school before fall semester starts? Do they get matched with another person or have to pay the difference, or can they change the housing type?
Wonderful question. So you go in with a group of four and then plans change. One person withdraws over the course of the summer. The answer is it depends on if you are in an apartment or if you're in a residence hall, because it's two different answers. So if your roommate group got lucky and you chose a Daniel Lee apartment together, there is now a vacancy in your apartment. So you're going to get an email over the summer that says, hey, we have a vacancy in your apartment. Your group now has 7 days to fill that vacancy. Essentially, we give you kind of right of refusal. Do you have someone you know that needs apartment style housing that's eligible for that apartment style? That group can let us know, oh, yeah, this person really wanted to live with us. They're coming back from away. They didn't get housing, or I don't know, whatever it might be. We want to add them to the space. They have 7 days to let us know who that person is. If they fail to fill the space within 7 days, then it becomes assignable for us in housing operations to fill. We're going to be assigning incoming students, transfer students, folks who are coming in over the summer from a leave of absence. We're going to be assigning students all summer. And so we'll probably use that bed space and then email the apartment, hey, we got someone new assigned to your space, so you're aware. Now, if it's a residence hall, there is no kind of right of refusal. Once a student withdraws from that space, we will notify the roommate saying, hey, there's a vacancy in your space. There was a change. You can go look at your current roommate list if you like. We will reach out to you when we fill that space. And so we will fill spaces in residence halls. We don't have any kind of obligation to the group. But of course, if a student is really passionate about someone they know who needs spaces, we typically have students reach out to us as well and advocate for who they may want to add. So certainly encourage that communication.
It's a great question. All right. I know I saw some questions flowing in and being answered as well, but I want to answer for the live group as well. What is involved in being an RA? And can you do it for just fall or just spring? What does that look like?
Sure. So our resident assistants, our RAs who live on the floor with our students. We also have apartment managers that live in apartments with our students, house managers that live in our Loy fraternity and sorority houses. So a few different kinds of live-in student leadership positions. Those positions were recruited for this fall, and so we did interviews in October. Offer letters are actually just going out, I think, today for our students who are applying for those positions for next fall. And so students should know before the end of the day today if they got one of our RA positions or AM positions for next fall. And what it entails, you get some great benefits. You're getting a free room on campus for the semester. You're getting a small stipend. You're on call for us. You're doing office hours for us. You're supporting residents during crisis times, but also roommate issues, doing programming as well, working with our faculty directors, our community directors, so really building a strong neighborhood community, neighborhood staff. It's a wonderful experience, a great way to get to know people where you live, which is oftentimes very convenient. You're on the same hall, but you get to be in that leadership role. So you can be an RA just for one semester. It's I'd say most students probably do the full year, but sometimes as they go into their junior year, they're going to be with us just one semester, and then they'll be away for another semester. And we do hire some spring only RAs to help fill some of those gaps that students are leaving behind when they go study away. So certainly an option, and that process happened already, but we will certainly be doing it again next fall for our next year.
Fantastic. And I'll make a side plug here as well. I'm an Elon alum myself and was also an RA. It's a really wonderful opportunity. So definitely encouraged. All right, we have time for just a few more questions. So we'll start with, in a large group situation, like 3 or 4 or 8 people, do all roommates have to request to live with all the other roommates in that group in order to get to live with them all?
Oh, wonderful question. It is just the group leader that is the one that is sending the roommate requests to people, and the people are accepting the roommate requests. Once they accept the roommate request, they'll be able to see who else is in the group. But it's the group leader that sends it and has to then, make sure everyone in their group accepts it. But the people that are accepting it don't have to accept each other's roommate requests or anything like that. But if they accept a roommate request, they join a group, and then they look and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that person was going to be in here. They can certainly remove themselves from the group. And so they have access to those buttons. The roommate requests also expire. So I'll say that they have 7 days to accept. And so if a group leader sends out roommate requests, you have to accept it within 7 days. They go into the housing selection application to that roommate matching portion, and it says so-and-so has sent you a group request. You can accept it right there. If they fail to do that, or maybe they really just didn't want to be in that roommate group, you just ignore it for 7 days and the invite expires. And so you don't have to make anyone feel bad. You can just let it expire, and they won't, think it, they won't know, they won't think that you refused it, you just forgot about it. So, yeah.
Great. All right. And then it's kind of related. If a person has an accommodation, can they not be in a triple or larger grouping?
It all depends on the housing accommodation. And so we do work with academic accommodations and accessibility. They're the ones that are issuing those accommodation types. And sometimes the types are pretty general, like first floor room. And a first floor room could be a triple, but it could be something really specific, like it needs to be a single room with a bathroom shared with no more than one person, with first floor and central campus near it. So it could be very extensive as well. But it is up to AAA to let us know, here's the type of accommodation that was approved, and we will look for a space that fills that type. Yep.
Great. All right. A more specific question here. If a sophomore student wants a single room in Global, will that be available to them, or would he be slotted into a shared room? Do LLCs in Global have single rooms available, or does it depend on the LLC? Follow up, as a sophomore in an LLC, would he be slotted into a room with a freshman?
Gotcha. So lots of questions there.
Yes.
Yes, sophomores are certainly eligible for singles in Global. There are a couple kinds of singles. So there's like standalone singles, that's just one person, and there's pod style singles. You got 2 people in there. Every LLC floor is going to have some singles because every floor in Global's got some singles. And so if he's looking specifically at an LLC in Global, there will be some singles available during that returning student LLC selection process. But again, students in that LLC are going to be put into an order by the advisor. And again, what the advisor does to determine what order they go in is up to the advisor. So it could be, I wanted to make sure people who are really involved this year in the LLC got to choose first. So maybe if they're top of the list, have earliest times, then they can go straight into the single room that they want. As a single person, or maybe they're, a new person in the LLC and they're going to get the bottom of the list. Well, if there's only double rooms available by the time you select, then that's what we have available. So you don't have to fill the space. You could still grab a space in the LLC, even if it's not available at that time. And we do have to save some single rooms for our incoming first year students, with accommodations that we may need to accommodate in different spaces. And so we do not offer every single to returning students. I think there was one more question at the end there.
I think that you may have covered all of them, actually.
Great.
Yes. All right, we'll answer. I think we'll have time for one more question before we wrap things up. Can you address how housing works for athletes, specifically rising sophomores? Is there anything different for student athletes?
There's really not. So our rising sophomore student athletes participate in the process as usual. I'd say that the only maybe difference is that oftentimes I see them grouping up, talking with coaches, trying to figure out how can we get like an athlete-only suite sometimes, but there's no priority given to student athletes in their sophomore year or anything like that, no pre-placement. So they have selection times. They go in, they select their spaces like everybody else. Sometimes they're working with a coach to say, like, we really need to fill out our roommate group. Do you know anyone? They're like, oh, I know someone from a different team that needs, a roommate. And so then you can get at least, mixed athlete, teams, but at least it's an all athlete suite. So, but otherwise it is all the same process.
Great. All right, I think we actually have time for one more question, so that's fantastic. If a sophomore in a group of 8 in Danley goes abroad for spring semester, can they sublease? Will a random student be placed in their spot, or will the bed remain open while they are gone? And then there's a follow-up to that. So if we want to start with that.
It sounded like it was an 8-person, so Daniely flat. So
Correct.
those are residence hall spaces, which means the students there don't have any obligation to fill that space. We don't kind of give them right of refusal. So if a student is studying away for the spring semester, study away in residence hall spaces is a qualifying reason to cancel that space for the semester. So we don't let students kind of buy out residence hall spaces to hold them while they're away because it's different than an apartment space. And so they would cancel their housing. The 7 folks that are remaining will get that email that says, hey, you got a vacancy in your suite. We will notify you when we've got someone new assigned there. Oftentimes it's an incoming for spring semester, incoming transfer student, incoming student coming back from abroad, from a leave of absence. And so we'll plug them in there and then let the group know, hey, you got someone new who has joined your space, so you know. And sometimes those spaces remain vacant. If we don't need that particular space in the spring, we typically have some availability, but oftentimes they'll get that email with us placing somebody in the space.
Great. And you did allude to the answer to their follow-up question. But does this mean that the remaining student in the room will get randomly selected once that other roommate goes abroad? And how are they
Yes.
matched? Yeah,
Yep, typically, and we do have roommate matching profiles we'll look at and make the best match we can based on kind of the incoming students we need to place. So we still do look at some of those roommate matching characteristics.
great. All right. Well, in the interest of time, I think we will go ahead and wrap up the Q&A portion here. If for any reason your answer or your questions were not answered, please do follow up with either the Office of Parent Engagement or Residence Life, because we want to make sure that your questions get answered. I know there were some specific case incidents here, so please do reach out with any questions or concerns. But please join me in thanking Kirsten and Molly one more time for their time here today and all this wonderful information. And should you need anything in the future, please do reach out. Have
Great.
a great
Thanks,
rest of your
Robin.
day. Thank you all so much.